In the sprawling metropolis of Lagos, where the gap between wealth and poverty could be measured in skyscrapers and slums, lived a young woman named Adan. Adan was not just any woman, she was the daughter of one of the wealthiest families in Nigeria. An heiress to a vast fortune. Yet despite her privileged upbringing, Adan carried a heavy burden in her heart. For all the riches, luxury, and influence her family possessed, there was something she could not seem to buy: genuine love and trust. Adan had watched people drift in and out of her life, drawn by her family's wealth. Many suitors approached her with promises of eternal love, but she quickly realized that it wasn't her heart they were after, it was her father's fortune. She grew disillusioned with the endless parade of false smiles, empty promises, and opportunists eager to attach themselves to her name for their own gain. This feeling of emptiness gnawed at her for years until one day, Adan decided to make a life-changing choice. She wanted to experience life free from the weight of her family's wealth and find a love that wasn't clouded by money or status. To do this, she decided to leave the glamorous life behind, at least for a while. With the support of her closest friend, Ngozi, Adan quietly slipped away from the world she knew. She moved to a small, rural village far from the city's noise, a place where nobody knew her, and she could live simply. She adopted a modest lifestyle, dressing in plain clothes and renting a humble house. No one could have guessed that the quiet young woman who arrived in the village was the daughter of one of the most powerful families in the country. Life in the village was a refreshing change. The people were warm, and though they lived simply, their lives were filled with genuine connections. It was here, in this quaint village, that Adan met Obina. Obina was a tall, strong man, with calloused hands and a heart full of dreams. He earned his living making handcrafted furniture, selling it at the village market. Though his business was modest, his ambition and work ethic shone brightly. He had dreams of growing his business, expanding beyond the village to the larger towns and maybe even Lagos one day. But for now, he was content to work with what he had, knowing that hard work and perseverance were the keys to success. Adan first met Obina while shopping at the local market. She had been drawn to his stall by the beautiful craftsmanship of his work. The intricate carvings on a simple wooden chair caught her eye. As they spoke, she was immediately struck by Obina's sincerity. Unlike the men she had known in Lagos, Obina wasn't trying to impress her. He spoke with passion about his craft, his plans for the future, and his pride in what he was building from the ground up. In turn, Obina found Adan's presence soothing. She wasn't like the other women he had known, those who looked down on him because of his humble trade. Adan listened to him, encouraged him, and over time, a bond grew between them. They often talked for hours about life, dreams, and the simple joys that came with hard work and dedication. After several months of friendship, their bond deepened into love. Obina, though he had little to offer in terms of material wealth, proposed to Adan, promising to work hard and build a future for them. Adan, who had fallen deeply in love with Obina's character and heart, accepted without hesitation. They were married in a small, simple ceremony, attended by a few close friends and villagers. The early days of their marriage were filled with happiness. Adan and Obina lived a quiet, peaceful life in their small home. They didn't have much, but they had each other, and for a time, that was all they needed. But as Adan saw Obina working tirelessly to grow his business, she began to feel conflicted. Adan knew how hard it was to break out of poverty, even for someone as determined as Obina. She knew the business world in Nigeria could be brutal and unforgiving, especially for someone without the right connections. And so, she made a decision. She would help Obina, but she would do it in secret. Though Obina had no idea, Adan began using her family's wealth and influence to support his growing business. She reached out to contacts in the city, arranging for them to order large quantities of his furniture. She made sure that important clients saw his work and ensured that he received the opportunities that would help him grow. All of this was done quietly, without Obina ever knowing. At first, Obina was thrilled as his business started to take off. Orders began pouring in, and he was able to hire more workers, expand his workshop, and even open a small showroom in the nearby town. His reputation grew, and soon he was known as one of the best furniture makers in the region. Obina was proud of his success and believed it was the result of his hard work and dedication. For a time, everything seemed perfect. But as Obina's business grew, so did his ego. He started spending more time with wealthy clients and businessmen who praised him for his success. He began to see himself as someone who had made it, and started looking down on those who hadn't achieved the same level of success. This shift in Obina's behavior didn't go unnoticed by Adan. She saw how he started to treat her differently, how he began to take her for granted. He no longer sought her advice, no longer spent time with her as he used to. Worse still, Obina began to change in other ways. He started to flirt openly with other women, flaunting his new wealth and status in front of Adan. At first, she tried to ignore it, hoping it was just a phase, but over time, the pain of his actions became too much to bear. Adan suffered in silence, unsure of what to do. She had given so much to Obina, helped him rise from nothing, and yet, he had become a man she no longer recognized. Despite her heartbreak, she continued to support him in secret, hoping that one day he would realize what he had become. As Obina's success continued to grow, his behavior only worsened. He surrounded himself with people who flattered him, feeding his ego and encouraging his reckless behavior. He spent less and less time at home, and when he was there, he treated Adan as though she were nothing more than an afterthought. One evening, after a long day at work, Obina came home with another woman. She was young, flashy, and clearly impressed by Obina's wealth. He barely acknowledged Adan as they walked through the door, laughing and talking as though she wasn't even there. Adan watched from the shadows, her heart breaking as the man she loved showed no sign of the respect or affection they once shared. That night, as Adan sat alone in their bedroom, she made a decision. She had endured Obina's mistreatment for too long. It was time to reclaim her dignity and remind him of who she truly was. She had kept her true identity hidden for years, but now she would reveal everything. The next morning, Obina woke to find Adan waiting for him in the living room. She was dressed differently than usual, no longer in her simple clothes, but in an elegant traditional Nigerian gown, the kind that spoke of wealth and prestige. Her posture was regal, and her face held a calm determination that Obina had never seen before. He blinked in surprise, still half asleep, as he tried to process the sight in front of him. "Adan, what is this?" he asked, his tone laced with confusion. Adan didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a deep breath, knowing that the moment had come to unveil the truth she had hidden for so long. "Obina, we need to talk," she said firmly, her voice calm but carrying the weight of everything she had kept inside. Obina, still groggy, waved dismissively. "Not now, Adan. I'm tired. Let me rest." But Adan's resolve didn't falter. "No, Obina, this cannot wait any longer. You need to know the truth." Something in her voice made Obina pause. He looked at her again, really looked at her. And for the first time in a long while, he noticed a change. This wasn't the quiet, humble woman who had silently supported him for years. There was strength in her stance, an authority he couldn't ignore. He sat up frowning, as the gravity of the moment began to sink in. What truth? He asked warily. Adan met his gaze, her eyes steady. I've been keeping something from you, Obina. You've believed that you built this life on your own, that your hard work and determination are the only reasons for your success. But that's not the whole story. Obina's frown deepened. What are you talking about? I come from a wealthy family, Adan said quietly. A family with more wealth than you can imagine. When I met you, I was searching for something real, something not tied to the riches and privileges of my life. I didn't want anyone to love me for my family's money. I wanted someone to love me for me. Obina's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. What are you saying? I've been supporting you, Obina, Adan continued. All the opportunities you thought came out of nowhere. The clients who suddenly became interested in your business. The contracts you received. Those were all arranged by me. I used my family's wealth and connections to help you succeed. Obina stood up abruptly, his face a mixture of shock and anger. No, that's impossible. I did this. I built my business from the ground up. Adan shook her head, sadness flickering in her eyes. Yes, you worked hard, and your talent is real. But without the opportunities I arranged for you, your business wouldn't have grown as fast as it did. I never wanted to take that away from you, so I kept it a secret. I wanted you to feel proud of what you accomplished. But you've changed, Obina. You've lost sight of what truly matters. Obina's hands clenched into fists, his face growing red with fury. So, you've been manipulating me this whole time? You made me look like a fool? No, Adan said gently. I wanted to help you because I loved you. I wanted you to succeed. But I also wanted you to stay true to who you were. But you let pride and arrogance take over. You forgot the man you once were. The man I fell in love with. Obina stood silent, his chest heaving with anger and disbelief. He looked around the room, taking in the luxurious surroundings that had once filled him with pride. But now, they seemed to mock him. A reminder that everything he thought he had built on his own was, in fact, tied to the wealth of the woman he had taken for granted. You can't just walk in here and take everything away from me, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Adan looked at him sadly. I'm not taking anything from you, Obina. I'm leaving. You can keep the business, the house, all of it. But I'm done pretending to be someone I'm not. And I'm done waiting for you to remember who you used to be. Obina's face paled as the weight of her words hit him. You're leaving? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Adan nodded. Yes, I deserve better than what you've become. I tried to help you, but you've made it clear that you don't value me or our marriage anymore. Obina's anger quickly shifted to panic. Adan, please, don't do this. I can change. I'll be better. I'll fix everything, I swear. But Adan had made up her mind. She had given everything to this relationship. Her love, her support, her wealth. And Obina had thrown it all away. She couldn't keep sacrificing herself for a man who no longer respected or cherished her. I hope one day you find yourself again, she said softly. But I won't be here when you do. And with that, Adan turned and walked out of the mansion, leaving Obina standing in stunned silence. As she stepped into the crisp morning air, Adan felt a strange sense of freedom wash over her. She had spent years hiding who she truly was, living a life of simplicity in hopes of finding a genuine connection. And while she had loved Obina deeply, she realized now that love couldn't survive when it was built on a foundation of lies, betrayal, and ego. In the weeks that followed, Obina's world began to unravel. Without Adan's quiet support, the business deals dried up, the contracts fell through, and his once thriving company began to crumble. The wealthy clients who had once flocked to him began to distance themselves, And soon, Obina found himself alone. His employees left, his assets were sold, and the luxurious life he had grown accustomed to disappeared before his eyes. Obina returned to the village where he had started, a broken man. He moved into a small, run-down house, far removed from the grandeur of his former life. For the first time in years, he was forced to confront the truth of who he had become. The man who had once been full of dreams and ambition had been consumed by greed, arrogance, and pride. As he sat on the steps of his dilapidated home, Obina reflected on everything he had lost. Most of all, Adan. He remembered the quiet, kind woman who had stood by his side, who had believed in him when no one else did. He had taken her for granted, dismissed her, and in the end, he had lost her. One afternoon, Obina's childhood friend, Ezine, came to visit him. She had heard about his fall from grace and had come to check on him. When she arrived, she found Obina sitting alone, his face lined with regret and sorrow. "You had it all, Obina," Ezine said quietly as she sat beside him. "And you threw it away." Obina didn't respond. He didn't need to. He knew she was right. "You lost sight of what mattered," Ezine continued. "You let your pride get in the way. But it's not too late to find yourself again." Obina looked up at her, his eyes filled with despair. How can I ever fix this?" Ezine placed a hand on his shoulder. "You can't fix the past, but you can learn from it. You can rebuild your life, not with wealth, but with humility and honesty. It won't bring back what you lost, but it might help you find peace." Obina nodded slowly, realizing that she was right. He couldn't change what had happened, but he could choose how to move forward, and so he decided to start over. Obina returned to his roots, working once again as a humble furniture maker. He rebuilt his life not with the extravagant wealth he had once craved, but with the satisfaction that came from honest work. He taught young apprentices the craft he had perfected over the years, passing on his skills and his hard-earned wisdom. Though he never regained the luxury and status he had once enjoyed, Obina found a quiet sense of fulfillment in his work. He had lost Adan, but he had learned a valuable lesson: that love, respect, and integrity were worth more than any amount of wealth. As the years passed, Adan and Obina's lives continued on separate paths. Adan returned to the world of wealth she had once left behind, but this time with a new sense of purpose. She used her family's fortune to support causes she cared about, empowering others and creating opportunities for those in need. She found love again, this time with a man who valued her for who she truly was, not for the money or status she carried. Obina, meanwhile, lived a simpler life, content in his small home, surrounded by the apprentices he had mentored. He never stopped thinking about Adan, and though he knew he could never make up for the mistakes he had made, he found peace in knowing that he had become a better man in the end. And so their lives went on, each shaped by the choices they had made. Adan found happiness and fulfillment in her purpose, while Obina found redemption in humility and hard work. The wealth they had once shared was nothing compared to the lessons they had learned. In the end, the hidden fortune that both Adan and Obina discovered was not in the money, the mansions, or the status. It was in the values they learned to hold dear: integrity, love, and the importance of staying true to oneself. Though they had taken different paths, both had come to understand that true wealth doesn't come from material possessions, but from the relationships we nurture, the honesty with which we live, and the values we hold close to our hearts. Years passed, and Adan and Obina's lives never intersected again. Each had moved on, carrying the lessons from their shared past. Adan became a well-known philanthropist, her reputation as a woman of substance and integrity growing alongside her family's wealth. She was respected not for her money, but for her heart, and for the genuine way she used her resources to uplift others. Her new marriage, one built on mutual respect and understanding, was a reflection of the growth and strength she had gained. Her husband admired her for her wisdom, her strength, and her ability to rise above the pain of her past. Obina, on the other hand, lived quietly in his village, no longer chasing wealth or fame. He dedicated himself to his craft, taking pride in the simple, honest work of his hands. Though he had lost the luxurious life he once thought defined him, he found something far more valuable: peace. He taught young men in the village the value of hard work, showing them that true success is not measured by the size of one's fortune, but by the integrity of one's actions. In his quiet moments, Obina would think back to Adan. He often wished he could go back and change the way he had treated her, to be the man she had deserved. But he knew that was not possible. Instead, he took solace in the fact that he had learned from his mistakes. He had become a better man, though it had taken losing everything to get there. As the years slipped by, the memory of their time together softened into a distant, bittersweet reflection. For Obina, Adan was the woman who had loved him when he had nothing, and she had given him everything. In the end, she had been both his greatest gift and his greatest loss. He would always be grateful for the lessons she had taught him, even if it had cost him their love. For Adan, her time with Obina became a chapter in her life that she looked back on with a mixture of sadness and gratitude. She had loved deeply, and though that love had been betrayed, it had also made her stronger. It had taught her the value of self-worth and the importance of surrounding herself with people who truly valued her, not for what she could give them, but for who she was. She would always remember the simple village life she had lived with Obina, the way they had started with nothing but love and dreams, and though it hadn't lasted, it had given her the foundation she needed to find her true path in life. The village that had once been the backdrop of their love story continued to thrive. People in the village remembered the rise and fall of Obina, but they spoke of him with respect. They admired his humility in the years that followed his fall, and they respected the way he had taken responsibility for his mistakes. To the young men he mentored, he was a symbol of perseverance, a reminder that life's greatest lessons often come through hardship. Adan, too, became a figure of quiet legend in the village, though many didn't know the full extent of her story. They remembered her as the kind, flaunting her wealth or status. In the years that followed, many in the village spoke of the hidden fortune that Adan represented, the idea that true wealth isn't in the money you have, but in the love, kindness, and integrity you carry in your heart. As time went on, both Adan and Obina passed into history, their lives becoming stories told to future generations. In the end, their legacies weren't defined by the riches they once had, but by the people they had become. Adan's story became an inspiration for young women, a tale of strength, resilience, and self-worth. She was remembered as a woman who chose love over luxury, and when love failed her, she chose herself. Her charity work lived on, and her impact on the lives of countless individuals became her true wealth. Obina's story became a cautionary tale for men who let pride and greed blind them to what truly matters. But it was also a story of redemption, proof that it's never too late to find your way back to what's right, even if it means starting over from nothing. And so, the hidden fortune, the true fortune, was revealed. It wasn't in the mansions or the bank accounts, in the fancy cars or the luxurious parties. It was in the love they gave, the lessons they learned, and the people they touched along the way. It was a fortune that could never be lost, no matter how many mistakes were made or how many riches were squandered. In the end, Adan and Obina had each found their own peace. They had each walked different paths, But those paths had led them to the same understanding, that life's greatest fortune lies not in what we have, but in who we are. The end. Did you enjoy this story? Kindly let me know in the comments section, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting African stories.